feel like this has become like the default thing for these videos right now, like this wearing this jacket. So I feel like this is the uniform now for the rest of the look back series going forward. Thor: The Dark World continues the look backs when it comes to the earlier MCU entries, and we are now into phase 2, having just recently talked about Iron Man 3. These next few are coming out a little quicker because there's a lot that's ramping up towards the end of the year, so there's going to be a lot of videos very, very soon. And so I'm sort of in a congested timeline over here. I do apologize for that. But I actually just rewatched The Dark World and my thoughts are still a little bit fresh, so I figured may as well just talk about them. I actually haven't seen this since back when it came out. I saw it in 2013 when it released in theaters, and I think I saw it one more time when it dropped on Blu-ray. And that's it. I haven't gone back to the movie since. This was my first time watching the movie in at least a decade. And so going into it again, I can honestly say that I didn't remember too much about The Dark World. It's not necessarily one of my favorite MCU movies, I can tell you that much, but it was a movie that I figured was worth a revisit because everything deserves a fair shake in my estimation. The Dark World is not something that I would still say is among my favorite MCU movies. In fact, it's very low when it comes to the rankings overall. But there is a difference between The Dark World just disliking the movie and, outright despising it. Because I think there are those who will tell you that it's a movie worth despising, something to get very upset over. But I don't think there's anything to get upset over with The Dark World. I think it's just a movie that is there. And the biggest issue that I have with it is that it just, for the most part, feels like a movie that exists. Even though there are moments in it that do stick with you long after the movie is over. Most of this coming to us courtesy of Tom Hiddleston, who I would say this is the first time where I completely sort of backed in on the claim that this guy's something. Like Thor, The Avengers, he was very good in those movies, very entertaining, and you watch those back and you get that, sort of experience with the performance. But it wasn't until I saw The Dark World that I really felt like, okay, now I see why people like this guy. Because I feel like he really gets to, flex some more of those, characteristic muscles that he has, especially when it comes to being, a little more charismatic as a character. And I really liked him in this movie. I would say he was easily the best part of The Dark World. He gets a lot of emphasis in this one, especially in the second half of the movie, and I really, really enjoyed that. So I would say, out the gate, that's one of the biggest positives that I have. Something else about The Dark World that upon revisiting I really enjoyed was the Thor and Loki moments. There is obviously this rivalry between them as brothers, or, adoptive brothers, as you will, but that aspect of it, of them not being able to get along after everything that's happened in their first movie and in the Avengers, obviously there is a distrust which is there from Thor to Loki and vice versa. And yet there is a sort of brotherly love between them in that, yeah, I kind of want to kill you, but at the same time, there is these moments where you can sort of tell that Loki still has a respect and reverence for Thor that comes through. And whenever that happens, I feel like the movie really does excel. I wish there were more moments of that though, because every now and then the movie is still so focused when it comes to the different plot points that are being dealt with, especially when it comes to the convergence and the villain of this movie, Malekith, played by Christopher Eccleston. Now, Eccleston's a great actor. He's been in a lot of stuff over the years that people have loved him in, including Doctor Who. This is not an actor who can't bring his A game to something. He's just not given much to do to bring an A game over here. Malekith is probably my least favorite MCU villain. And not because he's bad in the movie or anything. I mean, Eccleston is doing the most that he can with what he has. It's just that that's not much. There's nothing about Malekith that leaves a lasting impact on you, the viewer. Like, you walk out of Dark World, immediately you have forgotten that the Dark Elves were a villain, that were, any kind of threat at any point. There is one thing that happens with them, and that's the only moment of note because it involves killing Frigga, Rene Russo, who is Thor and Loki's mother. And so when she gets killed, the scene that follows after that, that funeral pyre moment on the boat, beautifully done. The score from Brian Tyler over there is also incredible. And visually, that sequence is spectacular. I feel like I'm railing on this movie a little bit, but the truth of it is there are things that I like about it. Chris Hemsworth, once again, as Thor, is really, really good. I think he did a fantastic job, once again. I like Natalie Portman again as Jane Foster. She was really cool. I like the extended moments you get with the side characters this time, like with Darcy and Selvig. Kat Dennings and Stellan Skarsgård are once again super entertaining over here. More so than the first one, they get a little bit more hands-on when it comes to the action in this movie as well. The action as well is very good. There's an incredible sequence on Asgard as it's being invaded by the Dark Elves. That whole thing was really great. In fact, I remember seeing that in theaters back in the day in 3D, and it was pretty spectacular. So I really enjoyed that moment. The final bit with the convergence going on, there's some good stuff where they're going through places and, spots, and it was really, really cool. And so there are some innovative things going on over there, and I enjoyed those moments for sure. And there's a couple of laughs to be had in, again, those conversational exchanges that are there with characters. It's a movie that is sprinkled with a lot of those things. I just wish that we got a lot more time to flesh some of that out, but we don't unfortunately get to do that because there was this very convoluted plot with the convergence that it wants to, work around with. And again, there's just not that much investment in Malekith as a threat. And so every time the movie goes into that, it becomes infinitely less interesting. And so I'm not really sure, how to feel about that entire thing by the end of it. Jane's entire arc also, she doesn't really get to do much past a certain point. She's got the ether in her, which is this reality bending thing that can be harnessed, and if Malekith gets his hands on it, he's going to use it during the convergence to destroy everything. Obviously, in the future, you know this as the Reality Stone. And we're now at that point where the Infinity Saga was really ramping up. And so you'd already seen the Tesseract at that point of time. You didn't know at the time that it was the Space Stone, but you had been introduced to one Infinity Stone, and now you have the Ether. So that's two. And as the movies progress, you're going to see a few more. And again, that was something that was very prominent when it came to the setup of movies in Phase 2 and the things that they were doing. And so in that sense, the movie does play an important role in things going forward, especially with where the ether ends up at the end of the movie, because that's where Thanos goes to get it in Infinity War. So in that sense, it definitely manages to have some kind of an impact. But as its own movie, in its own space, it's not a very memorable sequel, and it's not necessarily my favorite Marvel movie. I don't hate Thor the Dark World, but it just doesn't have enough to hold on to as its own movie, and having just rewatched it, I felt the same. There were moments, again, where I was having a lot of fun. I just don't think there are enough of those moments. Loki's fake out death, yeah, I felt something over there. And there is something that I liked about the ending as a result, which is when he is disguised as Odin talking to Thor about, what kind of son he wants to be. And obviously it's all being put on because he doesn't want to give away that he's Loki. But you can't help but feel like there is a sense of recognition despite that coming through, because even though it is not him, he still feels like he at least, there is that respect that he has towards Thor as the person that he is. I know the moment where he hands over the hammer is kind of funny because it's Loki's not worthy of Mjolnir, so obviously he's not going to be able to take that back, and that would give away that it's him. But something about, it's yours if you are worthy of it. It's I feel the sincerity in your voice, just a little modicum of respect in there for what your brother is doing. So I feel like it just somewhat comes through, even though it's caused Odin to be sent off somewhere where he should not be, because that's not actually Odin. So yeah, despite those issues, those things shine through. And so overall, by the end of Thor the Dark World, I found myself having an okay experience overall. It is something that I feel like is very flawed, and something that, again, I wish it added up to a few more things. Of course, it has those prominent details in there, but upon rewatch, I don't necessarily love it, but I also don't hate it more either. The flaws that I had the first time are still in this viewing. That hasn't changed for me in any way. But I also know that a lot of people really enjoy The Dark World. I think it's a fairly silly, fun movie. There's a lot to enjoy over here. You know, Heimdall destroying one of the Dark Elves ships. That whole sequence was really, really cool too. And there's some great shots over there. You know, that entire, like I said, convergence bit is very cool. There's definitely a lot of fun to be had. I liked Loki turning into Steve Rogers for a second. That was very, very funny. That got a huge laugh in the theater as well. I remember that. And that was extremely entertaining. And so, yes, definitely enjoy those things. And I still do to this day. But I'm curious to hear what you guys think because, you know, Thor the Dark World is another one of those contested movies next to Iron Man 3 for some people. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on it as well. Guys, thank you very much for watching. Look forward to more videos very soon. For Winter Soldier, I've done this with a friend of mine. Super excited to share it with you guys. We had a lot of fun talking about that movie. As always, if you like this, please do subscribe. And I'll see you guys at the movies.